And welcome to the next in the series of speaker interviews for Memphis Agent Camp 2026. My guest for this episode is Shubhangi Goyal. Shubhangi, how are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Doing well, getting through these speaker interviews. Shubhangi, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi all, I am Shubhangi. I currently work as a senior analyst at Admiral in the UK. I'm also a Microsoft AI platform MVP. I've been an active contributor in the AI space for the past couple of years. I previously worked for an AI startup for almost 5 years. I was working for natural language processing projects there, analyzing data of how the products are performing. And I also had the experience of working on a lot of metrics that I use to measure these systems. I moved to the UK around 7 years ago. I studied my master's at University of Bath. Before that, I worked for a couple of years in India. I was working for Tata Group, and I pursued computer science engineering as my first degree. I also provide mentorship, and I also actively support women in tech. And I try to, support women who want to break or build their career in data, AI, or technology. And yeah, that's just really me in a nutshell. I'm quite excited to be here and looking forward to this talk.
And speaking of the talk, it is entitled Designing Context First AI Systems. So, without, it gives the TLDR of that.
Sure. I guess I would say I will start from the beginning. So initially, when generative AI came, I think there was everybody thought it's some sort of like a web browser. You can just write a prompt and get an answer. And then there were a lot of questions and discussions around hallucinations and building applications around that, which weren't reliable enough. The talk basically is about context engineering and essentially building AI systems that provide more reliable outcomes so that people can actually build enterprise scale applications, not just personal agents, for example, or agents that can help them to answer emails or schedule meetings, to build something more solid and something which can be used for b2b or b2c. Basically, it is important to have strong context in the background, which is created through context engineering. You require a lot of data, historical data, knowledge base articles, to make sure that you have done the right grounding. Sometimes people think that RAG is the only way to build a good context or the grounding, and this talk essentially explores how you can build a good context, how you can design applications that are reliable and which people can actually use, and it will also discuss about memory, how you can essentially decide which sort of memory to use for your AI systems, methods you can use to measure the efficiency of the systems when you create them, so that when you explain what you have created to somebody, they can actually understand it and find it more reliable rather than just using it for personal use case maybe, and not making it scalable enough. So this is the crux of the talk. I will also be showing a small demo of how you can utilize that data and how can basically build something more scalable, reliable, and something more trustworthy.
So you mentioned RAG, but you said there are also other methods. What are some of those other methods that you're going to look at besides RAG?
So in this talk, I'm gonna cover I'll cover RAG in detail, but there are other methods. For example, if we design an AI agent, I think I've tried different approaches. For example, a lot of people use one singular large language model for which in which they're expecting a lot of capability, it's supposed to handle literally everything that is being asked. But sometimes when you build for example, multi-agent architecture or large scalable systems, what happens is SLMs, if you've heard of it, they slightly work better. Or the way you chunk and prioritize your data also matters in when you engineer the data in the backend. So I will be covering those strategies as well. I will be talking about how chunking and prioritization of data can be done. These are some of the questions which have been asked to me before. I gave something similar last year, and there were a lot of different questions that came up. For example, how can we better decide which data to use? How can we chunk data better? How do we ensure, for example, when we have taken a set of data, we know that it's going to be useful. How we make sure, for example, two questions which have similar or different intents, they have enough difference so that the LLM knows what is the question being asked, what's the right answer. So this is basically more holistic in nature, and you can say it's sort of like a follow-up to that talk. That talk was more introductory, but this is more in depth into like different aspects of those systems. So obviously RAG is one part of it, but there are other things to make RAG successful which are also needed. And also the other bit I'm also gonna cover is around like the metrics for like measuring the efficiency of the system, because at the end of the day, numbers provide the discipline that you need. If you can measure how your systems are performing, and that's like also one of the most reliable way of communicating how you have built something, how reliable that is. So yeah, I'm gonna be covering sort of like more detailed session on this one rather than just giving more like introductory overview of like what, for example, RAG is, what context engineering is, or what like chunking is really.
So what's probably going to be you're covering quite a wide range here. What's probably going to be the biggest surprise that people are going to walk away with? What's been kind of like the biggest surprise when you've done this talk in the past?
Um, I think when I did this talk in the past, I think questions were around, for example, like how do we decide what kind of memory to use? Like, it should be short term or long term. Then
Mhm.
I think strategies, the best way is to like maintain context. Switch when the context switch happens. I think that has been asked to me before. I would say, like that has come across to people as like something they would want to know more about, maybe like in more practical way. I would say. And I think the third thing, really, if I remember correctly, like on a talk which is on the similar lines, another question was like, I have a huge set of data, let's say 1200 KB articles, 1500 KB articles, and how do I prioritize? Because obviously, like, I only have a limited, storage of data. How do I make it more efficient? Because there is so much data. How do I, to perform that vectorization that, hey, like, this is where my data sits, and my system is able to identify that locate that point, and then, it's able to retrieve that context effectively. And I think like these are some of the questions which have been asked before, some of which I've tried to address in this talk. And I think these are some of the things which people will take away from this.
So since you brought it up, short term versus long term memory, which one is best, and how do you decide?
So, I mean, short-term memory obviously is used for like a shorter session, as the name suggests, and long-term memory is more like used when you want like your user to have like a longer session, and you want like, for example, your agent to remember what the conversation has been about. Without that memory, it resets like every single time. So it really depends on the use case. Like, for example, I worked on one of the projects which was around like building a voice application, and obviously in the voice application, people tend to like talk a longer period of time. So short-term memory is not really didn't really work effectively in that, because it was extended like probably more than 30-35 minutes or maybe longer, because it's just conversational, conversational AI really. So I think it really depends on the kind of use case you create. And obviously there are some other caveats, like for example, how much cost you're willing to like, incur for the application that you're building, what is the latency that is okay, for example, every time the interaction happens. For example, things like, when somebody is asking very small set of questions, like small terse inputs, or like very small two-worded or one-worded questions, how do you want your systems to like react to it, or do you want it to just like clarify the question? So I think there is like a whole lot of detailed caveats. I will try to cover obviously like how you can understand those systems, how you can decide, but I think it also depends a lot on like what kind of use case you have. Are you trying to build just like a simple agent? Are you trying to build like enterprise scale agent? Are you covering a lot of topics, like are you trying to address a lot of things, or are you trying to address like 4 or 5 things, which is like probably where you are happy with like having a small term memory, short term memory, and you don't really need that massive amount of information to like make an outcome. So I think these are some of the things which will basically be covered in terms of like what memory is, and like how you can decide which memory to use.
And I want to remind everybody that Memphis Agent Camp is coming up on March 16th, 2026. It is free, it is virtual. If you go to this URL here on the screen, that'll take you to the meetup page for the event, and you'll be able to RSVP, and I'll be able to send you more details about the event as it draws nearer. So that sounds like it's going to be an interesting talk with a lot of good information in it. Let's tell people how they can get in contact with you. So you are on LinkedIn
Yeah.
at this address, and you said you just started the YouTube channel. So
Yeah.
everybody go follow Shubhangi and get let's get her up to that 1,000. Let's get up to that 1,000 subscriber point.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So Shubhangi, are there any closing thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
No, I'm really happy to be here, and I hope you get you take away some important information from my talk. If you have any questions, obviously feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to answer any questions. And yeah, looking forward to it. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for speaking, and we will see you on March the 16th.